Unlike many other nations, the Philippines does not have a warrior king or a revolutionary general as founding father. Instead, we have a writer. Jose Rizal wrote not one, but two of the very first anti-colonial novels in world literature. Today, we mark Rizal's 163rd birthday. Is there anything new we can say about him? More to the point, does he continue to speak to us 137 years after the Noli was first published? Good evening, I'm John Nery and you are in the Public Square. We are joined today by a prominent scholar of popular history, Michael Charleston Chua, who is much better known as Xiao Chua, a professor of history at Salle University with a PhD in Anthropology from the University of the Philippines. He is a popular historian in both senses. He does research, writes, and appears on television to make Philippine history more accessible to ordinary Filipinos. And he has gained a very wide following for doing history. Welcome, Professor Xiao, and thank you for joining us in the Public Square.
Makasaysayang araw o gabi dyan at sa lahat ng ating mga nanonood.
I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you.
I know you're very busy. You have so many commitments, and I'm glad that we're doing this and right on Rizal's birthday. Una kong tanong, what is the best way to introduce a young Filipino to Rizal?
Oh, that's an interesting question. My introduction to Rizal, so I'm going to go to my life story in order to know how I got introduced to Rizal. Okay. So apparently, there are videos of the national anthem that they play every morning and every night. Mm-hmm. And then in GMA 7, you see Rizal being shot. So okay. It's kind of a, you know, we were not there when Rizal was shot, mm-hmm. but because this is repeatedly being played in films, in television, on television, it seems that we are all there. The shot mm-hmm. continues to inspire us to love our country because we know that Rizal died for love of country. So I guess those little things, he is in coinage, postage stamps. Mm-hmm. There's a prohibition now for posters in the classrooms. But okay. I got to see Rizal and the other heroes in posters in the classrooms. Mm-hmm. But for me, because I was already hooked with history, mm-hmm. my introduction to Rizal's to a more comprehensive view of Rizal was actually first Zaide. Okay. Gregorio Zaide.
Historian.
Because in the provinces, that's the most easily available mm-hmm. resource. The National Bookstore edition of Life, Works, and Writings of Jose Rizal mm-hmm. by Gregorio Zaide. Mm-hmm. And some people say it's boring, but actually there's a lot of information, and despite the fact that it has been written decades ago, still a lot of valid information about Rizal. But my epiphany about Rizal's perhaps magic mm-hmm. was when I was in grade 5. I went to Gotesco National Bookstore, mm-hmm. already burned. Mm-hmm. And I asked my mother, buy me this book, and it's the book of Ambeto Campo.
Okay.
Rizal Without the Overcoat.
All right.
So I was still very young at that time, so the way that it was written, essay form, was very helpful. He writes very interestingly, mm-hmm. that eventually I wanted to find out more. I wanted to deepen my understanding of Rizal because I admire him. I mean, now I really prefer Bonifacio, mm-hmm. but my first love was Jose Rizal. Okay. You can say that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how I got into. So I guess Ambet's book is one thing that can make people interested about Rizal because there are a lot of, not just people say it's trivia, I don't want to say it's trivia, a lot of information, mm-hmm. but also a lot of issues about Rizal that were tackled in an easy manner, like mm-hmm. the retraction, for example, sure. or why is he our national hero? Was he an American-sponsored hero? All of these things were tackled in that book. Mm-hmm. But for today's generation also, you can also add because I'm a public historian. That's also another term for popular history, public history. One of the most effective recently was the GMA series, Maria Clara at Ibarra, which is basically what some people said, you know, this might be bad because it's not the Noli Me Tangere. Someone messes up with the story of the Noli Me Tangere and the El Filibusterismo in that series. But, you know, a lot of the young-ins get this. That this is portal fantasy. They do it in Japanese series and all, in Korean series. And because of this series, suddenly, Aklat Adarna's supply of the unabridged Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, they got out of stock. They have to reprint. So the orders became, the interest of the young people became to go back to Rizal, became so, people became excited again about Rizal. And John, remember, this was in 2022. We just got from a divisive election. A lot of people are disappointed, and some people were saying, you know, and we are divided. Each one is radicalized in a bad way that we cannot really have a conversation. And suddenly this series comes in and makes us talk again about our country and make us agree again. And you know, the most fascinating thing about it, despite the fact that a lot of the years previous, Rizal has been attacked. Rizal has, they wanted to dethrone Rizal in many ways. But in the end, it's Rizal that every now and then brings us together in times when we needed it most to talk again. So I guess that's the magic of Rizal.
First, a quick note about Bonifacio. I think we should do another episode because I share your view that we should recognize Bonifacio as the first president
thank you.
in our history. You know? But you know, your detour through your own personal history reminds me of my own reckoning with Rizal.
That's also interesting. Please tell us about it.
Well, no, I'm like you know, I was exposed, of course, through popular culture, you know, the coins and all that. But when I graduated from my school in 1977, it was also the 100th anniversary of Rizal's graduation from that same school.
Oh, yes.
So, we were immersed that year, especially during graduation, in, you know, Rizal lore, no? How they conducted classes in Ateneo then, and so on. So that for me was really eye-opening. I, instead of Rizal coming out, you know, emerging like this super, you know, specimen, he actually came across as very relatable. Maybe it was the way it was put together. And then the next milestone for me was actually reading Leon Maria Guerrero's
beautiful
English translation, which he had put together for the 100th birthday, of course, right? The first Filipino, which was of
Noli Me Tangere.
Noli, which was very beautifully done. I know that, for instance, Ben Anderson has some problems with it and so on. But when I was reading it on my own, this, you know, it wasn't a requirement for any subject. Sabi ko, ang galing nito. Tawa ako ng tawa. Parang ang iba yung tingin ko sa kanya. But to go to your main answer, it's great that we are able to reintroduce Rizal through something like, you know, Maria Clara and Ibarra. We are asking this generation to reimagine what it means to literally encounter Rizal. And if that means, you know, Woody Allen-like in Purple Rose of Cairo, entering into the book and becoming part of the narrative, then great.
You know, the good thing about that was, there are some things that you wanted to ask Rizal. Why did you write these things? Why are you so, why do you depict women in such a sorry state? Why? And why did you kill Elias in the Noli Me Tangere? Of course, he answered that through Jose Alejandrino, that he thought that he would not finish a second novel, so he thought that he should kill Elias already. Well, Elias should have been the leader of the revolution, someone who was more selfless than Ibarra, who was an egoist. He was only provoked because he was hurt. But you know, the good thing about it was, we are able to ask them through Clay, the character who went back to the Noli Me Tangere. She was probing the character. She was probing Rizal in a way. And that's the most effective way of introducing anything historical, is to say that what is happening now, what is the issues today, and how you're going to relate these issues to the past. This is the most important way, or the most easy way to bring the young people to the past, and we should always remember that, because we always look at the past. We say we must tell the past for past sake. No, it cannot happen like that. It has to be relevant today.
Yeah, so I get that, no, and I appreciate that. As a teacher, we need to exercise our imagination,
right?
And maybe that's the best way to introduce ourselves or reintroduce ourselves to the works of Rizal. But how, this is a quick aside about history.
Yes.
How do you reinforce a respect for facts?
Oh.
No?
Yeah.
Which should be part of the discipline of history, so that you can, go to town, you can go wild with acts of imagination, with fiction, but at the same time, you teach a respect for facts.
It's intention. It's about intention.
Okay.
Of course, Noli Me Tangere is already fiction,
That's
and
right.
then you fictionalize it further. But the intention was to introduce love of country. I mean, Suset Doctolero, who was one of the writers of this series, we don't agree with politics, but we can have a quarrel on so many things. But if there's one thing that we agree upon, this is our country. So this was a way that we are able to talk to each other because of this series, and I think that is what we should see. The intention, if the intention is selfish. When you do these things, when you create a film, when you create a film about history, you cannot do anything but to fictionalize it, because you have to dramatize certain events that were not written in the documents, in the documentary history. So it's what Manolo Quezon said, for example, about Quezon's game. It's getting to the truth through make-believe.
That's right.
So when you use make-believe for more power, not for your country's sake, but for your own family's sake, I think that's deplorable, should I say. And I think, it boils down to the question intent, which is, of course, sometimes it's very hard to ascertain. But that's how it is. So, because remember that even if a lot of people don't realize this, and a lot of our political families actually know this, history has a power, not just a power, a great power to make things either worse or better. Because when you know something about the past, there are lessons that can be learned from it. So you can learn lessons from the past, pero pwede rin makilala mo yung sarili mo.
That's right.
Because of the past. You become a better Filipino, you become a better person by knowing what your ancestors did. Because what your ancestors did before is still being passed from us from one generation to another, even subconsciously through culture, bayanihan, pakikipagkapwa-tao. I think we should all still believe in these things, and this is still passed to us. John, I'll tell you something. The culture wars in America is terrible. Terrible, okay? Even ordinary people kill because of ideology, because of religion, because of, certain beliefs that they have. There were white supremacists, of course, the war in Israel and Gaza. there are black Americans, I've heard that, hurt Filipinos. Ordinary people.
right.
I'll tell you something. In the Philippines, even if we're so divided on Facebook, I think we just let off steam. When the DDS and the BBM and the Yellows and all of these forces are out, they're not in social media, magagalang naman sila. They are ordinary people who do, who get by every day. So, I believe in the Philippines, people are saying we're hopeless. No, we're not hopeless. I see everyday people doing good things, and I think that is why Rizal is alive in our everyday lives.
I want to return to that towards the end, no? This idea of what Rizal called the moral nation.
Yes.
But you referenced the Noli as a work of fiction. Of course, it's a work of fiction.
Right.
It's a novel. And for many of us who were forced to read Rizal, this was our introduction. Usually, we would read the comic book version.
Yes.
Yeah, but we would get introduced to the great characters: Ibarra, Elias, Maria Clara. Great, also in the sense of being vivid, no? So you have Damaso, Crispin, and Basilio, and Sisa, and so on. And yet, I think that for many people,
Yes.
there might be an assumption that this is actually our history. Right?
Okay.
Na, for instance, Rizal himself returned to the Philippines as an educated person, like Ibarra.
Yes.
Yeah. The irony here, of course, that when he wrote this, and it was published in 1887, featuring a returning Ibarra, si Rizal mismo, hindi pa siya bumabalik.
Correct. Exactly.
And yet, what happened was parang it came true.
Yes.
So there's this tension between an act of imagination and historical facts in Noli. Can you help us
Even
make
Rizal,
sense of this?
even Rizal said that the Noli Me Tangere, although a work of fiction, he told his friends,
Yeah.
I think Blumentritt, he said to Ferdinand Blumentritt, this is the history of my people for the past 10 years.
Yeah, that's right.
So there are, of course, as a propagandist and as a writer, he composites characters, he exaggerates some things. But, there was a Capital Tiago who existed. There were some theories who that person, was it a Sunico, was he a Balbino? We do not know, but they're based on real characters. The Crispin incident where a boy was killed was... there was an incident in Bulacan under Father Pierre Navieja that a boy died. I think I don't know if he was killed by the sacristan, just like in the Noli Me Tangere. And Pierre Navieja was actually executed by Andres Bonifacio brutally in 1897 in Cavite. So, it says, because the Noli Me Tangere is an exposition of Philippine problems. It is fictionalized, but as Manolo said, it's getting to the truth through make believe. And this is where Jose Rizal said, because the key here is the town of San Diego, which is supposedly located in Laguna. But there's no San Diego town in Laguna, and there's no San Diego town in the whole of the Philippines. You find the Philippines, you go to LBC app, and then there's all the barangays in the Philippines. There's no San Diego town. And why is that? Because, and this is the reason why Rizal is our national hero. San Diego is nowhere, but it is everywhere. So, when you see in San Diego a Sisa, you see Sisa everywhere. You see a mother who is weeping, who is getting crazy because of the problems of society. You have people like Padre Damaso, you have Salvi, you have Crispin Basilio, you have Maria Clara, oppressed women. They're everywhere in the Philippines. And this is the reason why Rizal is our national hero. Even if they did not read Spanish. The Filipinos, even if we did not read Spanish before, what happened to us was, there were some people who have read it, we talked about it, Rizal was lionized, and even the stories perhaps got exaggerated going around, and we were beginning to talk to ourselves, this is what's happening to us. This is what's happening to our country. And so, they gave us a sense of one of having one suffering, one pain. And of course, Andres Bonifacio took to himself that he's going to be the one who's going to unite the people, using Rizal's writings, by the way, translating Rizal's writings like the Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Lupa to become Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Bayan, a poem from his annotations to the Morga, his view of history, Rizal's view of history, to the Ang Dapat Mabatid ng Mga Tagalog, to translating Rizal's last poem, Mi Ultimo Diyos, to Ang Huling Pahimakas. So, all of these things are telling us that, you know, that is why Rizal is our national hero. Because he and his friends in the La Solidaridad, in the propaganda movement, and eventually, those who took the helm to the Katipunan, to the Philippine Revolution, they actually became the ones who gave us a sense of nation, a sense of oneness. That despite the fact that we have many languages, many cultures in the Philippines, many ethnicities, we can be one people, and we can defeat the one great thing that is our big problem, and that's colonialism. So I think that is that.
There is a moving passage in Calao's History of the Philippine Revolution where he narrates or he describes a scene where he says that one way in which people heard about the message of Noli was that someone would bring a copy and they would gather under a tree.
Wow.
And somebody would read it aloud. Right? How did the word about Noli spread? It was published in 1887. Rizal went back to the Philippines after doing a grand tour of Europe, but spent only a few months because he was quite literally hounded out and left again in February 1888, right? But by then, I think people had already heard about Noli. How did it, I mean, for someone who you know, he lives in 2024 and this is the way we spread things, no? I'll send you a PDF file on my GC, on our GC. How did something like that, which was subversive, get around?
I will tell you something. I don't know if it was Dudong Nemenz who told me, the former president of the University of the Philippines. So I heard him say this, that if you want to kill an idea, you suppress it. So, of course, what happened? No, if you want to make, if you want to spread an idea, you try to kill it. So the problem was, if the censors, perhaps, the priests, the prailes who became the censor, like Padre Rodriguez, for example, if they did not review the Noli and they did not find it subversive and they did not publicize it and they did not talk about it in the pulpits of the church, I guess the Noli Me Tangere would have been a forgotten thing. Because it was so hard to bring copies to the Philippines at the time. And I think he only got 3,000 copies available. And not a lot of them reached the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken. So, I think the mere fact that you made an issue, that the friars actually made it a big... It's actually the friars who became the #1 promoter of the book. Said, I'm interested in knowing what's that Noli Me Tangere thing. What is this? Because the Padre Rodriguez wrote a pamphlet talking about all of these things, about the Noli Me Tangere. And I think it's Kay Ingat Kayo, if I'm not mistaken. And then Marcelo H. Del Pilar, who was, I think, still here in the Philippines, he wrote an answer to that, Kay Igat Kayo, Be Slimy as an eel. So, and then you have, of course, I think it was Rizal who also wrote La Visión de Padre Rodriguez. So, all of these things made it more, and people became more interested. So, if you want to, if the government, for example, wants to ban something, the more people will watch it. I think that is the lesson for tyrants, I guess. If you want to kill an idea, you don't. If you want to kill an idea, don't mind it.
I have actually many questions to ask you, but we have limited
I
time.
know.
I want to focus on maybe, how should we approach Rizal now? But before I ask that particular question, You mentioned Del Pilar,
Yes.
right? Who wrote that counter pamphlet, and then eventually they became friends because he
Yes.
had to flee to Spain. But during this time, in their first year, there's this remarkable letter. Rizal writes to Mariano Ponce.
Yeah.
And says, sino mo to si Plaridel?
Right.
Di pa niya kilala, no? Also, at around the same time, roughly the same time, he writes a letter to his brother, who is about 10 years older than him, Pasiano, and he asks something like, how do you translate
Freiheit.
Freiheit, or
Yes.
German for freedom, no? Or libertad? How do you translate it into, at the time, Tagalog?
Yes.
Right? Tapos yun, nakikita mo. So, can we talk about that? I mean,
The relationship.
you have a group, a generation
Right.
who are struggling with first definitions.
Right.
Right? What in Tagalog is, so sa kanya bago yung kalayaan.
Right.
And I think it was Del Pilar who coined that, if I'm not mistaken. Can we talk about that? I mean, so this is a generation struggling with first principles, first terms.
Well, first of all, it's the symptom of having to reclaim identity.
Okay.
Remember that we are enslaved by the Spaniards in many ways, but in getting the Spanish culture, we retained some of them as well. We retained some of our culture as well. So our culture did not really die. But sometimes you just have to, to awaken it up in a way, or be conscious that it's a different Catholicism, for example. It's not Spanish Catholicism, it's a Filipino Catholicism. So our culture did not die. But sometimes it just got hidden. And you have to, and these people, this generation, they want to define Filipino identity. They want to free their people, and freeing their people means that they have to be not Spaniards, but to have a Filipino identity. And so we are now, people are, for example, Marcelo Del Pilar published the Diaryong Tagalog. Remember that at that time, the people were writing in Spanish, the intellectuals were writing in Spanish. And he had the sense that if the people we want to be read, we have to do it in Tagalog. And in fact, one of Rizal's first great works, Pag-ibig sa Tinubuang Bayan, Lupa, was appeared in the Diaryong Tagalog. So they were redefining us. So look, even kalayaan was actually coined for the first time by a priest.
Oh, okay.
From Bulacan, Bulacan. His name is Mariano Sevilla, who became eventually Malolos Congress delegate. Mariano Sevilla translated Libertad from Italian, the prayer book on the flowers for Mary of Flores de Mayo.
Okay.
He translated it to Tagalog, Kalayahan. And it was because Marcelo Del Pilar was from Bulacan, Bulacan.
That's right.
He uses this often, and Rizal read it and said, "Oh, what's this Kalayaan? What's this?" It was not in the Florante at Laura, Rizal said. So he was asking Pasiano, what is this word? And just imagine how powerful the propagandists were, because while they were asking themselves, what is the meaning of this word, and they're using already these terms. Just a few years after asking that question in 1892, Andres Bonifacio and his friends will establish the Katipunan, and they are shouting Kalayaan.
Yes.
See, and the whole country, diba? The newspaper will come out and all of these things. They will popularize it more. So it's a good thing to actually look at freedom, Kalayaan, as a new word for us at that time, because that means that there's a new beginning. Remember, we are not a nation. We're peoples, we're cultures. But the sense of nation was invented, as according to Ben Anderson, right? By our heroes. It's an imagined community.
That's right.
But the words, the ideas, the definition, and that's why it is important that we keep on talking about these concepts of kaginhawaan, kalayaan, because when we talk about them, we give power to them, and we make them part of our aspirations, because the aspirations for a better nation did not end with Rizal or Bonifacio, but it should continue until today with all of us.
Rizal has been, we've been talking about Rizal for generations.
Yes.
Right? So you can have, let's say the first generation could be the revolutionary generation.
Right.
They had a very high image of Rizal.
Yes.
In fact, they wanted him to bless their the revolution, right? But then you had the Americans come in, and that's where the seeds of the idea that he was
Pacifist.
that he was like a made in America hero. I think it was Austin Coates who called him America's forerunner, which I based on very little evidence. And then you had, even the Japanese when they took over, and then you had the 1960s generation. They had some very trenchant questions to ask about Rizal's role, and they were asking why not Bonifacio and so on. And then you have the martial law and post-martial law generations. So different ways of approaching Rizal.
Yes.
It's 2024. I like the word that you used earlier in our pre-interview discussion. You said maybe we should recalibrate
Yes.
the way we understand Rizal, the way we teach Rizal. How should we teach Rizal now, given our time, given what we know about Rizal, and given the state of our country today?
Well, I'll go back to Zeus Salazar's definition of kasaysayan, because in the Western sense, history is the written record of past events, but the written records were created, of course, by the powerful and the rich. So history has always been the powerful, the domain of the powerful and the rich people. But Zeus Salazar says we should define history in our own terms, and that is kasaysayan. Kasaysayan has been in the old meanings even before. Kasaysayan came from the word saysay, meaning. So I hope that the teachers would stop letting people memorize Rizal's best friends, Rizal's women, but tell stories, connect it to, first, the importance of humanizing Rizal. Heroes are to be emulated. But if we always say Rizal is a genius, then yes, he is a genius, that's true. But he's also a human being. And he became a genius and he contributed to the country because despite his many failings, he was able to be able to go beyond them. And that's an inspiration to a lot of us. So make Rizal relatable, that is what you said. But more than that, we should not stop there. We should not stop from the facts of Rizal or the life of Rizal. That's why in the law, the Republic Act 1425, it should be life, works, and writings of Rizal, because the writings are important. We were having a discussion earlier that Rizal left so many things about things that we still problematize up to now. People are saying the Filipinos are poor because they are indolent, they are tamad. May sinulat na si Jose Rizal about that, diba? Rizal really talked about the ideals of being a nation, right? Of how we should, in the La Liga Filipina, he stressed that we should love each other, right? We should love each other, we should cooperate with each other so that we can be a real country. So, these are the things that we should be reminded of. We should go back to his essays. Not just the Noli Me Tangere and the El Filibusterismo. We should go back to his essays. We should go back to the history that he also wrote, so that we can go back to our identity, to our ancestors, and how this identity can make us one again. So, I'll just remind you, or remind our viewers, that history's power is actually the power to unite. When the Babaylan told the stories before of their heroes, of the epic heroes, when they chant, when the whole bayan listens, they feel one people. And so that is still the power of history. That's the power of Rizal, Bonifacio, and our other heroes. When you tell their stories of sacrifice, when they tell their stories of humanity and so much love of country, it makes us realize that in order to make a better nation, we have to continue that love. We have to continue sharing that love because we have a nation of pakikipagkapwa-tao.
From the different generations who have welcomed Rizal, what can we learn from them? From the revolutionary, from the 1960s? You know,
Yes. Okay, that's good because Rizal is not a perfect hero. In fact, I share with, for example, Renato Constantino, although I don't share that he should not be our national hero, but
he says he was an incomplete Filipino.
an incomplete Filipino in such a way that, because they were still constructing the Filipino, right?
That's right.
So, what I'm saying here is, you could learn from them by actually being critical of Rizal's Western influences. I think what happened to Rizal was because his major flaw really was he did not understand the revolution. He thought that the revolution is useless. He did not realize that this is already the voice of the people asking for change. And this is because because of his education, he was divorced from the Filipino sensibilities, the Indio, katutubo sensibilities. And Rizal tried his best all through his life to understand this. And there was a time that he even said that when we talk about Filipino nation, where we should exclude the Aitas and the indigenous people because we're showing Spaniards that we have already becoming like them. This will be parang detrimental to our cause. In which, of course, the great Isabella de los Reyes, the eventual labor leader of the Philippines, said, I am the brother of the wild. They're part of Filipino identity. So even Rizal had mistakes in many ways. So, but by being critical of Rizal, we are not here to dethrone him. We're not here to destroy him. We're not here to cancel him. But to learn that we cannot only solely, although he is our greatest hero, we cannot solely build our idea of nationhood to Rizal's ideas. We should also look at Bonifacio's ideas. We should also look at the indigenous people's ideas and other heroes' ideas. And let's continue talking in a talastasang bayan so that we can completely, the complete Filipino, if there's such a thing, we can talk about it. We can do it, you see.
So yeah, we can learn specific things from each generation.
Yes.
So the notion of total sacrifice
Right.
from the revolutionary generation, the notion of criticism, a critical approach to it, maybe the notion of the value of education from what my parents would have called the pre-war generation. So many things to learn from Rizal. Maybe just a couple more questions. I want to go back to Bonifacio.
Yeah.
Because it's so important that the leader of the revolution saw Rizal in a very specific light, right? Can you talk about that? How did Bonifacio see Rizal?
Well, Bonifacio saw Rizal as a light, a leading light to the emancipation of the people, to the freedom of the people. That's why I tell you, you idolize someone all your life, and then you offer him the katipunan and you offer him the presidency and totally rejects the whole idea, or at least rejects the idea of revolution now, maybe later, but not now. I guess Bonifacio was disappointed at that time. But, I'll tell you something. It's not only Rizal that is important in this story.
Sure.
Because despite Rizal not supporting tacitly the revolution, the sisters of Rizal were there, and they're a great presence in the Katipunan. They're like, just because they're brother and sisters of Rizal, they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
So it's
the only brother also.
Yeah, the only brother, Pasiano, the general of the revolution. In fact, there are newly discovered documents from the Archivo General Militar de Madrid that the Katipunan were actually having dinners, fundraising dinners for the Rizal family. Because remember that the Rizal family were already out of Calamba at this time. They were squatting with relatives. So, all of these things, they were constantly using Rizal. They were putting his, I mean, for good and for bad, they're putting Rizal's pictures in the meetings of the Katipunan. They're invoking Jose Rizal's name. And Bonifacio was conscious that he could actually use Rizal to strengthen the organizations. That's why, despite the fact of his lack of participation in the Katipunan, he becomes the soul of the revolution, as the Spaniard said. And Bonifacio confirming this by translating the Mi Ultimo Adios to Tagalog and spreading this, Rizal become now the hero of the revolution, as inangkin na siya ng revolution.
Yeah. In my first book on Rizal, I identified, I forget the name now, but a Cavite poet who had actually translated that. But I think it was very important that Bonifacio wanted to be known as the translator.
There's a debate.
But even at that minimum condition, right? You could see how important it was. I want to ask you, totoo ba yung pinadala ni Bonifacio si Emilio Jacinto when Rizal was in a boat under detention outside in Manila Bay, na pumunta doon tas parang to offer him an escape?
Apparently, yan ay nakatala sa mga kwento, ano? Rizal did not, I don't think Rizal wrote about it. He probably did. But on the side of the Jacintos, the biography of Jacinto, there is that incident. And I guess that is also whether it was true or not. No? Whether I still have to recheck, because remember, even if we know this story, sometimes where did it come from? You still ask them. But
that's part of the responsibility of the historian, right?
Right.
To trace it back
to the real source. But even so, the important thing about this was Emilio Jacinto dares, to talk to Rizal, because remember that Andres Bonifacio himself, he doesn't go to Rizal. He sends these people whom he trusted. And remember, they trust them because Pio Valenzuela was a doctor, and Jose Rizal was a doctor. And then when the doctor cannot do it, he sent this young guy, perhaps, to talk to Rizal, because he know that he can talk to this guy. So yeah, there you go. But it's an interesting incident. Again, Rizal refuses to join them, and that is the reason why he was eventually killed. But well, it shows you that I don't know if what was Rizal planning. Probably he really wanted to eventually be executed in a way, because that is what he was thinking already since 1892.
That's right.
Because he could have joined the revolutionaries, right? But no, he didn't. He knew that sacrifice, as you said, as you were pointing out, sacrifice is a powerful imagery to create the nation. Because the nation is created by the blood of martyrs, and perhaps he wanted to be one of those that will shed blood.
Talking about this, Rizal, sacrifice, blood of martyrs, and so on, many people might get the impression na he wasn't a fun guy. Parang, ganun ba talaga siya?
Well,
seryoso ba talaga siya? Ganun. But based on, there has been so much written already, so much has come to light. Can you give us like a more rounded picture of Rizal?
That's quite easy, because if you're going to look at your own personality or my own personality, and you will see that we have not one-sided, we're so complicated. Sometimes Rizal can be irritating, because you remember that while they were partying, right? And then the people thought that he's going to pay.
Okay.
And I don't know if there was an agreement or what, but the people thought he was going to pay. And then suddenly, no, you have to pay, you have to share. And of course, his friends laughed at him. And then suddenly he just put his hat, started to pass the hat. You have to put... So, there you see how he can be serious. He can be... Remember that he also did not want to have anything to do with his fellow propagandists, womanizing, gambling, So, although sometimes he gambles. But, how you can see that he was fun if you play the game that he wrote. He wrote a game called Sibila Kumana. And this is,
Okay.
for a few years, this was available in Solidaridad bookstore.
Okay.
You can actually play it. Rizal wrote questions and he wrote the answers. And you can go, you ask the question that you want. There were about 50 questions. And the answers are found in the book. You have to spin a top and you will get the answer. You know, it's kind of scary to play that game because sometimes there are real situations. You will ask, will my life be short or long? And then there would be wise. And so it's like, this is, aside from the Noli and the Elfili, this game, you're able to communicate with Rizal in technically because he's giving you answers to your questions. And these answers were wise, they were fun, they were witty. And this is where you see, oh, that the guy is actually fun. I mean, I like to play the game with him.
We should reintroduce that game.
yeah. Sibila Kumana.
So there are many of these things, no, that we don't really know, or like they're not in the first 5 things we know about Rizal, right? So
Right.
he made this game that he made a pipe for Blumentritt,
Oh, yeah.
or that he was a very good farmer in Dapitan. There's so many aspects to his personality.
Right.
Talagang well-rounded, and I think there's a lot of that coming out. Maybe a final question about his idea that we need to be worthy of our freedom. Right? So yung idea niya that we should create a moral nation.
Yeah.
Maybe we can end on that.
Oh, yeah,
note.
okay. I used to think that Rizal was wrong when he said that. Because for Jose Rizal, you have to be educated to deserve our freedom.
Okay.
For Andres Bonifacio, the mere fact that you're a human being, you deserve freedom. So these are two different ideas. And in many ways, I thought Rizal was being too elitist. But the problem here was, you really need education. Because if you become free and you don't know what to do with freedom, then you just botch it. So I now actually subscribe to the notion that maybe you need education. Well, we all deserve freedom. We all deserve to be free. But we should calibrate that freedom with education. But the only problem, of course, in this country is what kind of education. For many, many years, despite the fact all our efforts to indigenize education and to make it more Filipino, because we had 300 years plus of colonialism, the colonial hang-up is there. And of course, Rizal also became a victim of this colonial hang-up because he was westernized. But I guess this is the unfinished task of our heroes, is to untangle more that colonialism to actually bring a more Filipino education so that we stop being confused with who we are. Because of this colonial education and being Filipino, because yes, we're a product of all the cultures that, being a Filipino nation and Filipino culture, that is a product already of the many cultures.
That's right.
That got entangled with us. And so we cannot be purist about Filipino identity and culture. But at least I would like people to eventually realize that our hope is not with the foreigners. Our hope is not with going to foreign land, but really strengthening our own country and who we are and building industries. Because Rizal is actually an entrepreneur who showed us that, it's not just your mind that you have to actually develop, but also your security as a person. So all of these things you have to consider all of these things to actually have a more holistic view. And of course, we're going back to one of your favorite topics about Rizal, the moral nation. that Rizal once said, and this is my favorite, one of my favorite quotes from the Philippines in 100 years. He said, with the new men that will spring from her bosom, and the remembrance of the past, when we remember what we had, we will become free once more, like the bird that leaves his cage, like the flower that blooms to the open air. We will recover our good old qualities, which we are losing little by little, and again become lovers of peace, gay, lively, smiling, hospitable, and fearless. When we recover what we lost, our sense of we did not really lose it. We just have to awaken it. Pakikipagkapwa-tao, kapatiran, the sense of kalayaan, which is not just kalayaan sa sarili mo, but you want to free others as well, so that we can all achieve kaginhawaan. When we recover all those good qualities, Rizal said that we will become a better country. So that is, as a public historian, that is my quest. That is the quest, is to have a more Filipinized education in the country.
I still have so many more questions, but on that Rizalian note, we will end this. Thank you very much, Professor Xiao Chua. This has been a stimulating, enlightening, eye-opening discussion. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po at makasaysayang gabi sa inyong lahat.
And that's it for us tonight. The next step for engaged citizens, as always, is to take a more active role in rebuilding our democracy. See you in the public square. This is John Nery. Thank you and good night.